our distinguished colleagues here that we're going to introduce shortly. I guess you have the clicker, Robert?
Yeah.
Well, these are your rules, so everyone's going to know they're yours.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get started here. So I'm going to introduce some of the rules, and then we're going to have the panel introduce themselves and talk a little bit about some of their memories at UT, followed by some technical presentations and discussion. So to set up everything and remind everyone how to behave, we had put together a couple of rules here. So this is the rules of engagement for the panel. So, we're going to have a lot of discussion about technical items here, but what we don't want to have is that everyone's like, that's a really good point. I agree with that. Brilliant what you just said. I totally, yeah. Don't do that. Don't feel the need you have to answer every question. Try to keep your answers brief and to the point. If the moderators are falling asleep during your response, is an indication that you've been talking too long. And then, if possible, try to disagree, not just for fun, but if you have a legitimate a disagreement, or you have a counterexample, something that would be fun, that's going to be very interesting for us. Now, the audience here, so I don't know to the extent that we'll get to audience questions, but if for some reason we have time and you're allowed to ask a question, I'll remind you that questions are actual questions with question marks at the end. Question is not a paragraph about something you think, full stop. So ask a nice, sharp question. And then, don't try to just impress everybody else with your question. That's not the objective. But if you do want to cite some research from the moderators, Gustavo and I, that would be great. And in fact, if you cite both of our papers in the same question, we might relax the first two. All right, so with that, we're going to move into the introductions here. So Gustavo, you want to kick the first one off here?
So what we're thinking is we're not going to give you, in some cases, already long and distinguished resumes, so we're just make it short and then ask each panelist to share a nugget of their experience at UT. So the first up is Chong. He's a professor at KAIST, Korea Advanced Institute and Advanced Technology. And he got his PhD quite some time ago, as you can see, in 1995, and then came back to Austin as on his sabbatical. And as I mentioned in our first panel, he hosted 5 of us professors when WCG had just started back in KAIST. So we have glad to have him back, and maybe we can share a nugget at some time.
Okay, it's really great pleasure to be back here, Austin, and it's very nice to honor to be a panelist, one of the panelists of this exciting panel. And I'm going to share some of my memory at UT. As Gustavo mentioned, I finished my PhD in 1995, so I guess I'm one of the eldest alumni in this room of the UT ECE. And my PhD advisor was Professor Sanchili. He's no longer in academia, and in fact, he is currently a CTO of Huawei, so he's in China. So there are a few of the Sanchili's PhD students here. So Amy and I forgot. Not me. Okay, and also when I came back to Austin in 2005 for my sabbatical year. At that time, all these WNCG professors were joining the WNCG group, including Robert and Jack and Srirang and also Chan-Byoung. So it was very nice to watching the WNCGs growing and watching the success of the WNCG. And one of the interesting stories is that at that time, Robert invited me to his home, and he has a very nice but small jacuzzi there.
I heard something small there.
Is this running out?
Yeah, I have a feeling you need to wrap it up here.
I really enjoyed that small jacuzzi together. That was a very interesting in memory. And also, when I graduated in 95,
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, when I graduated in 95, right at the time, I mean, he actually joined, you joined UT at 93 or 4, right?
That's supposed to be sure.
Yeah. So we got to know each other from since then, and then now we are maintaining those friendship with Gustavo. Yeah. So actually, I remember that I'm a last year PhD student, and he was a junior faculty. He doesn't have the money, so that we went to Infocom together and actually shared the room together. That's why our friendship started. If I remember correctly. Okay, that's
All right. Hot tub and a room with some of the WCG faculty. I'm not sure we want to know more here. So, let's keep going here.
Next up is Dandekar. He's currently a professor on electrical computer engineering at Drexel University, and he graduated in 2001.
Thanks, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So I graduated in 2001, which I guess is the second oldest alumni on the panel here. My story, when I was here, I worked with Professor Wang Chu, and we did a lot of work with experimental smart antenna systems. So at the time, we had one of the first smart antenna array test beds to exist in academia. And my amusing story is that we went out in the field to take measurements downtown. And we had a van that we used to store at the Pickle Research Center, and we used to deploy the van someplace in the city. And I had my 95 Ford Escort station wagon riding around in circles with some questionable wiring, running a signal generator and doing some drive testing with that. And you can imagine the story in black and white if you like. Also, this was quite a while ago. We were driving around one night an area which I now know to be the financial district of Austin, because we had attracted the attention of local security, and yes, eventually we did get pulled over by the police. And I'm glad this story happened in the pre-9/11 world rather than the post-9/11 world, because in the post-9/11 world I probably would end up in Gitmo. The police contacted us and amusingly said they pulled us over because they suspected us of driving while intoxicated, driving while channel sounding was apparently not a crime then. One of the things that I tell my students now, which my advisor told me, which was terrible advice, so for all the students who are here, I asked my professor, what should I do if someone asks us if we can do testing in the city? He said, just tell me you're a student. That is not a legal defense, okay? So, I've since learned about FCC licenses and things like that, so, let that be a lesson all the students. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's keep going here.
Next up, Sharayu over here. She is currently an assistant professor at the Department of IST. And she got her PhD more recently in 2014.
So do you have any old memories to share with us?
So I'm very happy to be back here. I worked with Sanjay and Sujay. My first memory here was, two things. One, I didn't quite know how big WCG was before I got here, my bad. And the first all-hands meet, which typically happens in the fall semester where all the professors and all the students get together, there was some shock value to how many people belong to this group and what all goes on. And sort of before that, I was taking Sanjay's class on network science. It was the first time he was offering it. And Sujay, Gustavo, Jeff, Constantine would all sit in this class. Some regularly, some not so regularly. So this whole concept of sort of one professor teaching you but four others giving you their insight as he goes along was very new to me. And I don't know if the research is collaborative because the teaching and the learning is collaborative or the other way around, but everything is collaborative around WCG.
That's great. I feel kind of bad no one ever sits in my class. Okay. Oh, ouch. Let's not repeat that here. All right, so our fourth panelist here, Eric Rozner, finished his PhD at UT in 2011, and he's joining us here from IBM Research. So he's also one of our two industrial representatives on the panel. So do you have any fond memories you want to share?
Sure. Thanks for having me. So I'm Eric. I graduated 2011. My advisor was Lily Chu. I don't know how funny my story is, but I'll tell it anyway.
We'll it sounds really good.
We'll see if people like it. But I remember once I had this project I was working on, and I really wanted to get this paper deadline for a conference that was coming up. So I was working hard, you know, spending long hours in the lab, spending nights, and I'm working late night in the lab, and all of a sudden, I must have just fallen asleep. And I remember waking up and thinking, one, holy crap, I don't remember falling asleep. But then number two, oh my God, what code did I write before I fell asleep? Because there's no way that code was any good. But thankfully the system ended up working and we ended up getting the paper submitted anyway, so it must have been good enough. Sleep coding must be okay.
All right, thank you, that's great. I like the aspect that you were working hard for the paper deadline. It wasn't phrased like, well, my advisor was whipping me to meet this paper deadline. I really like that, for certain reasons. Okay, so to continue here, this is one of my former PhD students, Chan-Byoung Chae, and you were, where is Chan-Byoung? Over there. Number 11 is your number, yeah. So I have all my students ordered according to when they graduated. So he's number 11. And he's currently a Underwood Distinguished Professor at Yonsei University. So do you have anything you want to share with us? Should I show you a photo or? Yeah?
Yeah, thank you for the kind introduction. It's really, this is my lab at UT. I joined UT in 2005, and we used to have a party after the group dinner. So at the time, I didn't know how precious the moment was. Not only for my personal life, but also for my research. I didn't know at the time we could use the cigar for communications. So we'll show you more information. I will show you more information later how we could use the cigar for communication. That's it. So
okay, excellent. Thank you.
By the way, if someone could recognize one guy on the right side, please don't tell him. Because I'm going to share the hotel room with him in December in Singapore, he might kill me.
Yeah. Yeah, and also, if you recognize the guy sitting next to that guy, just keep it to yourself too. So, all right, so finally here we have one of my other PhD students. Now, I'm blanking on your number, Antonio. I think it was 5. I think you're 5. We were discussing this last night. And you're co-founder and CTO of Artemis Networks here, which is a thriving startup in the Bay Area. So, do you have anything you'd like to share with us here?
Yeah, sure.
And I took the liberty of
there you go. I knew it.
I had another one and I couldn't find it.
Yeah, last one, the funny story is related to this t-shirt. So, actually, that was a different trip. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me here. I feel very blessed to be here with you all. Be surrounded by all the teachers that allow me to be here. I learned so much from Professor Heath and everybody else, Sanjay, Jeff, Professor Rappaport, everyone, Gustavo. That's a beautiful thing of WNCG. You can just walk in the office and have an exchange of ideas and learn from there. So I'm very, very much grateful for that. So let's go to the funny story now.
Funny story that doesn't humiliate your advisor. Just
okay. It's about a professor over Heath and something to do with scuba diving. So it was a month from my graduation, and we went to BTC conference in Australia. And went well, and me and Robert flew to Cairns to do a scuba diving trip in Great Coral Reef, and I was just getting my advanced open water, and so they said, when you go with your body, okay, so make sure that your body is always with you. Okay, that's rule number one of every diver. So we did
where the story is going.
Alright, so after 5 days of training, then finally it was last day, and we finally go for a dive together. Me and him finally can dive with my advisor. And the first dive, I think he was the leader. The second dive, he was following me. And we ended up, I think that dive we learned what's downdrafts are about. Alright, so we started going downdraft, and it was beautiful. We were mesmerized by the coral reef. And then on the way back, we were against the stream, so things were much harder. So we kept swimming, and I kept checking on Robert. And all of a sudden, I turned my head, and back then I had long hair, by the way, so I had to kind of look around to make sure I could see him. I couldn't see him. All right, so he had disappeared. I started looking for him, and the first thing that popped into my mind was like, oh boy, when am I going to talk to his wife? and the second thing that I thought of is, oh boy, my graduation is in a month. So long story short, I went up and called for help. So I asked, the boat came in, and they finally said, look, your advisor is already on the boat. So that's the funny memory of
Now, to be fair, I mean, I just couldn't swim in the current, so I got swept away. So it was really sad story, in fact. But I'm glad you could be here to, both of us together.
Thank you.
All right, so with that, we're going to have, what we asked the panelists to do was to prepare a slide, or maybe two, and to give us a few minutes of their perspective on the topic of the panel itself, which was, what was it? It wasn't disruptive, but future...
Emerging directions.
Yeah, not disruptive, but emerging directions of communications. So we're just going to start off with Chong. So okay, let's hear a perspective here.
Okay. The topic I'd like to share today is basically is a new research direction in terms of the resource allocation problem in communication and also communication networking. Because the reason I think we have to rethink this resource allocation problem is due to the network softwareization. So by saying network softwareization is, it's a combination of NFP, which is one of the significant paradigm shift in communication and networking research and also industry. So it's a combination of NFP. NFP means network function virtualization, and also the SDN, software defined networking. So what is the NFP is that basically the goal of the NFP is to provide flexibility in network function processing within the infrastructure. So if you take a look at the picture on the left-hand side, so basically NFP means that we want to use commodity server and hardware. And then we don't want to buy, purchase special purpose network equipment anymore. So basically, we want to implement all the network functionality in a software form. And then we want to put this network function on a commodity hub. So that you can imagine that it's all about money. So we can actually reduce the capex of the infrastructure and also OpEx of the infrastructure. And on the other hand, SDN is a technology to provide the flexibility in packet forwarding in a way that basically we have at the bottom we have physical network devices, all kinds of devices. One is the interface, you have a 3G interface, 4G interface, and so on and so on and so on, and then also switch. And then we virtualize this network device and equipment in a sense that, so we have something like a network OS, which is an SDN controller, so that I can have a freedom to send the packet over all these virtualized device easily, okay, in a very flexible way. So So it's possible to deploy service in a very fast fashion, and also it's scalable. As long as you have a software, you put any network function over any hardware, even I can put my software switch on my smartphone to control the outgoing wireless interface. So sometimes I can virtualize a 3G interface and the Wi-Fi interface into a single virtualized interface, and so on and so on. So there's a lot of opportunity there. So if you look at the market vision, and if you look at the right-hand side, virtualization it has been popular in the computer area, especially cloud computing. As you can see that the purple color is the market growth of the cloud virtualization. But as you can notice that network function virtualization and software-defined networking market will be growing much faster than the current cloud virtualization. So a lot of business potential. Okay, the research problem and research direction I raise is given this paradigm shift. If you take a look at this example, I have to send, if you think about one network flow, I have to send some flow from a source to the destination. But I have to process this. I have a job to process through this transmission. Remember, I have to do firewall computing, processing, DPI processing, and intrusion detection system processing. So basically, I can arrange the sequence of this processing done in such a way that I can fully maximize and then also try to accommodate more and more flows with this sequence of the processing job. And also we have to schedule over wireless at the last mile, or I can just arrange this function on a different commodity server, or even for my smartphone and so on. So that the challenge is that so far when we deal with the resource allocation, we are always thinking about wireless bandwidth and also wired network capacity and so on. But we have to deal with this multiple type resource, computing, storage, and wireless bandwidth, and all together in a single problem. Okay, but the problem is difficult because their workload is drastically different. Imagine a single flow. Some flow requires DPI processing, firewall, IDS. So in terms of a CPU workload, some of the applications are very high demanding. Meaning like cycles per bit is very high. But if you think about some flow which just require packet forwarding only, will not consume CPU too much. Then imagine that how do I have to allocate CPU resource to this flow, these two drastically different flows, in order to maximize throughput or in order to maximize the utility of the entire network. So it's a totally different problem. Okay. And then those resource problems should be distributed, should be autonomous eventually. And imagine that we have a lot of unknown.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Thank you. All right. So we tried to give you a couple warnings, but thank you for your input there.
I had thought about a lot of questions, but as you were talking, I was thinking that is the essential problem one of complexity, right? So the networks and the things that we want to do on the networks are becoming more and more complex, and you're really saying in order to enable that complexity, we're going to have to do much more sort of disciplined virtualization of resources and so forth. And I guess in the context of that point, I might say, well, one of the successes of IP was sort of reduce complexity by defining sort of well-defined interfaces, that narrow width. And so I guess that begs the question: is this really the direction that we want to go of making things more complex, or is this the mechanism, the new mechanism to try to make things simple and create some kind of narrow ways to standardization of the software methods?
Yeah, because of the advancement of the computing, I think this is the time to do this dynamic. Although it might be because of due to the advancement of the computing, I think in a network it's the time to accommodate this dynamic resource allocation. Although it might be complex. We should be able to develop some of the idea how to, simplify the problem when we solve the problem. So some of this idea I can think of is that how to quantize network state, and then also how to select important network state to be maintained. Also, some of the states which may be dynamically changing and stochastically varying, then maybe we could just use some of the learning ideas.
So panel, any reactions? Any questions? Panel thought they didn't have to do anything, clearly.
So I think one big challenge will be when you have things like service chaining to make sure that you don't kind of waste resources down the chain, right? To make sure that if you're doing something early in the chain, that you have enough resources later on down the chain to be able to work with this. Do you think like you could take some sort of what we've learned in the past about doing things in the network with like congestion control, maybe to solve problems in a similar way to allocating resources in this sort of infrastructure?
So your point, please.
Oh, it's the question. I guess I'm wondering if we can take lessons learned from network allocation, like congestion control or something like that, and apply it to this sort of problem where we have kind of fixed compute, but dynamic allocation that needs to do.
I don't know if it's the right answer to your question or not, but for example, I think in this aspect, even congestion control like TCP should be revisited. Because imagine that because currently TCP itself has been designed assuming that network resources are bottleneck. But imagine that if some of the CPUs are bottleneck, I can easily create a situation that TCP performance is really crazy. So, because demand, the workload demand, one is cycles per second, and the other is a bits per second. So we are dealing with a different resource. So I think TCP itself should be revisited to be.
All right, so that was a good topic here, so let's keep going here. So, next up here, Sharayu, would you like to give us your perspective here? Yeah.
So, a small disclaimer, I'm going to talk about a project that started at IIT Bombay before I joined. So, I know some aspects of it, but I don't quite know the whole picture and the journey. But I'll try. So the main motivation for this came from the fact that there's a great urban-rural divide in terms of internet connectivity in India. The cities are all well connected, but there are a lot of villages, I think that number, there's 640,000 villages that don't even have voice connectivity. So the idea here is to sort of bridge this divide. Some of it the government has to do, and the rest maybe institutes like IIT can help. So I'll walk you through the challenges. The most effective way of doing it is, of course, to lay fiber, use fiber across the country. But it's a slow process, time-consuming process, expensive process. And there are 3 more things that have slowed this down further. One is that even if fiber is put in place, the expected revenue per user is very low in these areas because most of these users are daily wage laborers very little money to spend. So there's no incentive for, say, private companies to solve this problem. The other thing is a lot of the terrain in India is mountainous. So laying fiber is not easy. In addition, power supply is intermittent. There is power supply, but you can't rely on it too much. So whatever the solution is has to be sort of light enough to let solar take care of a lot of the demand. And in addition, there is sort of, even if terrain is not all that big an issue, digging through somebody's farm is not easy. So those issues also show up a lot. So to solve this problem, the government of India has introduced a scheme where in multiple phases, they are going to bring fiber connectivity to local self-government offices. And a local self-government office typically is in charge of 2 to 3 villages which are a few kilometers away. So even if fiber is brought to these offices, it doesn't quite reach the homes. So if the government does this, then our task was to sort of provide the middle mile where we take this connectivity from the headquarter of the local government all the way to the villages. And one solution that was proposed was to use TV white spaces. Now, there is a part of the spectrum that is allocated for TV broadcast, which is from 470 to 590. So it's 120 megahertz divided into 15 channels of 8 megahertz each. And the way it is used right now, at any given point, at most 2 out of these 15 channels are used by the national broadcaster. Which means we have these 13 channels that are available to us for to provide middle mile connectivity from the fiber point of presence to the villages. The good thing about TV white spaces is the following. A line of sight is not needed. Propagation characteristics are good. Low power can make it work. And it's in the government's hand. So if they want to give it to the villages, they can do it without sort of trying to sell it. So once this was proposed, a bunch of steps were taken to understand how the TV white space is utilized in India, and 2 major test beds were put in place. The picture there is sort of a caricature of what the network looks like. So you have a point of presence, fiber point of presence, then a middle mile network which works in TV white spaces. This in the picture is just one more base station, but this could in general be a mesh network which could work in a point-to-point or a multi-point kind of setup. And at the end, at the village end of it, from the TV white space receiver, things are then given to a Wi-Fi access point, and the villages can use the Wi-Fi access points to get data. That's the basic idea. A couple of things which were peculiar to India and had to be brought into the picture was if commercially available TV white space hardware was used, the base station was about $5,000, $6,000 US, and that's not something they could afford. So what they did was to take a Wi-Fi router, which did all the baseband processing for Wi-Fi, and then connect it to an RF board. These were both off-the-shelf cheap equipment. And then the RF board down converted it from 2.4 gigahertz to 500 megahertz. So it's essentially a Wi-Fi signal, but down converted to TV white space, and then that was transmitted. So the cost of this equipment came down to a few $100 from a few $1,000, which made it, I mean, it's still not commercially viable, but at least there's hope. So here is a brief overview of where this project started and where it is. Started in 2012, and then they built these devices. The first test bed came up in 2014, and then there was an impact assessment in 2015, and it was not clear as to how to measure the impact of such a network. But the metrics they came up with were the amount of money saved and the amount of man-hours saved. So the money saved comes into the picture because most of the users are daily wage laborers, and if they have to travel 10 miles to do their job on the internet, they don't work that day. So they lose that much money. And man-hours is obviously clear. It's essentially the commute time somebody spends to go to an internet hotspot, which could be the nearest city. It might not even be the government. So both the numbers were encouraging, which led them to deploy a new test bed, which is 25 villages. The key difference between the two test beds was the scale was one thing. The other thing was that we don't want to depend on TV white spaces completely, because we might get the license today, it might get taken away tomorrow. So essentially any technology that can work should be deployed and tested. So here if you see, it says Wi-Fi point to point on that. So what they did was, in addition to TV white space, they also tried 5.8 gigahertz Wi-Fi. And what was found is, it worked and can be used further. Okay, so moving forward, the challenges now are commercializing this whole thing and sort of making money out of it so that it can keep running. Thank you.
This technique works really well. It's eerie.
You're better at it than me, clearly.
Questions?
Well, I mean, I had one question is, I mean, where was did you learn something from a research perspective that's going to drive your research agenda going forward with this? Can you give us some insights there, like something interesting that came about from this?
I think one thing that came about from all of this was, initially they tried out CA, and even the usage patterns are not understood. So then they tried TDMA, and some optimization techniques were used to sort of understand the load and dynamically divide transmit power. But I mean, in terms of research challenge, I think that's the biggest problem they had to solve. The rest of it was getting the implementation right and bringing the cost down.
Okay.
So I think one of the things I was wondering when it comes to white space exploitation is there, from a cost benefit analysis perspective, is there value in being dynamic or just saying like, this is where I believe the white space is and I'm just going to use it, or to actually have some sensing component where you're looking for white space? Is it worth it to do that sensing, or do you just say, this is where I know where my white space is and this is how I'm going to use it?
I don't know if that has been explored so much because, okay, so the terrestrial TV broadcaster keeps moving. So that sort of sensing has to be done. And in terms of, the experiments currently have to run in this band. That's what the government has licensed for the institute. So I don't know if they've explored anything more dynamic.
Let's squeeze in a quick question. So what do you think of these other programs, balloons and drones to deliver connectivity to rural areas that Facebook and Google are talking about?
I don't know if the cost stuff would work out. I think feasibility is there. But so what they're trying to do here is get village level entrepreneurs to use this setup, make enough money so that they can maintain this structure and then pay back the service provider, with the person who's providing connectivity to the fiber point of contact. So I don't know if there's that much money to be made there.
So it's sustainable.
Okay. Well, good. Let's keep going here. So we've got Eric with an interesting title. Give us your thoughts here. How are you going to make us happy?
All right. So I'm going to make us happy through context-aware network management. And before I get into what that means, I just kind of really want to motivate things. Since I'm at Texas Wireless, I probably don't have to motivate too much that wireless traffic demands are increasing. A study by Cisco said in 5 years we're going to have a 7-fold increase in wireless traffic demand. But when you start looking 10 years out, I think that number 7 is going to be way, way higher. You're going to have autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars, and drones. You're going to have wearables and augmented reality systems. There's going to be robotics and IoT. And there's going to be all sorts of new applications that are really going to push the demand on these networks. So in order to satisfy all these demands, I think we're going to kind of have to throw the kitchen sink at the problem. We're going to have to try to satisfy all these demands in any way we know possible. So we're going to have to look at techniques to add spectrum. There's been a lot of work on making 60 gigahertz practical, but there's a lot of people working at terahertz and visible light communication. We're going to have to look at techniques to increase capacity in the network. So maybe it's spectrum sharing on TV white spaces, or maybe it's doing things like full duplex communication or event MIMO or things that people in this room know way more about than me. But I think an emerging third pillar will be looking at how we actually use the allocated network resources. And what I'm proposing is going to kind of come to the forefront is this context-aware network management, where we're going to actually look at the consumers of applications that are on the network, and we're going to learn about those consumers to more effectively allocate resources in the network. So if you look at some of these, adding spectrum, reducing capacity, a lot of times we're looking at, how much bits per hertz do we get. But I think once we start doing this context aware, we can start looking at happiness per hertz. And if you look, there's a lot of technologies that are available now to kind of get happiness of the actual user, of the consumer of the application. So we don't necessarily care about an application level metric. We're going to care about a user level metric. And we can get things like biometric data from wearables to understand like a user's emotive state. We also have cameras throughout our environment. We can use like advances in computer vision to kind of understand how users are reacting to the performance that they're getting. So, if you start looking at what our environments will be, you can look at different sort of allocation strategies. So activity-based might be something where, this is just a really simple example I came up with that your grandma could kind of understand. But if I'm watching a live stream on my phone, and I look away or I start talking to someone else, why do we need to allocate resources for that anymore? So I think what we'll see is kind of an integration of the sensing with mechanisms to allocate network activity. Content-based is, again, very similar. If we have a notion of how happy a user would be based on some content we receive, maybe we can prioritize content in the network or allocate resources to certain content in the network accordingly. Those examples I gave kind of focus on a human user, but I think in the future, there's going to be a lot more non-human users in the networks than human users. So when you talk about a consumer and you talk about happiness, what the heck does that even mean when you start looking at robotics or drones or something like that? And I think you can kind of extend this context-aware network management policy to look at other sorts of things on the consumer. So one example might be AI-based. In the future, you might have high-end luxury cars that have really good self-driving AI, but maybe your economy car doesn't have as comprehensive AI as that car. So now when I'm making decisions in the network about who to send traffic to and how much traffic they should get, maybe I just know that this car is smart enough, he'll figure it out if I don't give him this data he needs. But this dumb car over here, I better give him this data or we're going to have a crash. You can also start thinking about trends in networks. Networks are getting really flat and compute's getting pushed to the edge. So maybe it's not that unreal to think that we can start getting more and more information about the robotics or AI or whatever that's running on the edge. And if we have some sort of model of how they perform and maybe even know a little bit of their state, we can use that, I think, to make better decisions on how we allocate network resources. And then, if you want to scale that out, then you can start looking at environments or ecosystems and how all these multiplayers in this might all work together. Okay, so I think the supporting technologies, we have everything there. We have programmable networks, which we can get from software-defined networking through NFV and through cloud computing. We have sensing available where we can sense things on the users. We have sensors deployed throughout the environments that can let us learn about how users are consuming content. And then one of the last things I'll just touch on is I think it's interesting that the service providers and the content providers are merging. So if you look at AT&T, they own DirecTV, I think it is now. So they're not just a dumb pipe, they actually have some content, and they have servers that are distributing that content. So that's extra knobs of control. If you look at Google, they have Google Fiber and Google Fi. They have content in YouTube, and they even have the mobile devices and the wearables. So it seems like all of these supporting technologies that we need for you not to hate your cell phone carrier anymore are in place.
Well, I was just going to say I'm a little spooked out by the the sensor's observing how I'm reacting to the content I'm getting. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, privacy is obviously probably the biggest thorn in the side of this whole vision. But over and over again, users have seemed to kind of give up some sort of privacy for some amount of benefit.
Yes.
So if they can get better or cheaper, network performance for giving up a little bit of privacy, great. So it's not clear how that will go, but it's certainly an issue to be considered.
I guess, yeah.
Just a quick question. Regarding your location strategies over there, how can you measure the happiness of the customer? So do you have any good criteria to measure those kind of information to apply to the system?
Yeah, so there's research already that can try to kind of infer users' happiness just from like cell phone usage. And when you start getting wearables in the picture, they can start accumulating biometric data. So I don't think it's going to be too unreasonable to get the emotive state of a user. There's also computer vision algorithms now that can look at the muscles you're exercising in your face and infer emotions from that. So I think there's a lot that can be done already to infer some emotion and maybe happiness.
I guess I have two questions to see if I can go. So I guess first comment would be, who should be responsible for my happiness? The phone, the service provider, the content provider, everyone. Also, you weren't very specific, but you did talk about happiness per hertz. So I think I'm thinking about my service provider there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the service providers would be the primary driver just because, spectrum's expensive. They spend a lot of money to acquire new spectrum. So if they can make sure they're utilizing it to the fullest potential, there's one of making your users happy, but there's also this thing of if the user's got happiness X, how much less can I give them before their happiness moves to X minus 1, right? So you can look at it from that perspective as well. So I think there's a lot of incentive for the service providers like AT&T and whoever else to kind of adapt something like this if possible.
My second question, which is tongue-in-cheek but still a question, I think there's increasing evidence that people want to be disconnected in order to be happy. And so, if you really want to optimize happiness, are you going to shut off my connectivity?
Well, we can figure that out per user. So if you're happy without service, we can just not give it to you.
All right, very interesting. Okay, so let's keep going here. We're going to shift gears a little bit to functional fabric, transceivers and sensors. Kapil, take it away. Oh, you want to go to the actual content slide? Oh, sorry, I'll switch let's start with this guy, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so I'm going to be talking about some functional fabric work that we're doing at Drexel. So since I was here, I was working in wireless and electromagnetics. I took a hard turn and also started dabbling in some biomedical work. So this is some work that I've done through funding from NSF, NIH, and Drexel Center of Functional Fabrics, which is directed by Chan-Byoung, who's a fashion designer. And in case you're wondering, a research meeting involving doctors, engineers, and a fashion designer was very interesting. I used to think that talking to people at the networking level, the protocol stack from physical layer was as far as I could go. So this is some work that we're doing where we're trying to make unobtrusive wireless devices. And when we think about wearables, we typically think about like Fitbits or other types of sensors like that. I brought a problem, so I don't know if I get a sort of prize for that. This is a radio. It's actually knitted using conductive and non-conductive threads. There's a passive RFID chip in it. And as it stretches and contracts, you can get sensor readings from that to tell you, if someone's breathing, like an infant respiration monitor for monitoring babies, using it as a contraction monitor for monitoring contractions. One of the things I'm always surprised about is that you can put a man on the moon, but you can't have a contraction monitor that doesn't involve a woman tethered to a big bulky machine. It doesn't enable home monitoring, by the way. So we have some pictures there that show our pregnancy monitoring system. We have our robotic baby there wearing a wearable RFID that can sense the contractions and be able to tell with machine learning approaches, whether or not the baby's entering some sort of apnea or SIDS type of condition. The third picture from the bottom right shows some work that we're doing with power harvesting, right? So instead of just having a passive RFID chip that just powers itself with a RFID interrogator, working with people in material science who are looking at vivid supercapacitors, right? So you can not only harvest energy, but then you can also store it locally and use it as you need. No one's going to be using that to charge their cell phones anytime soon, but if you're talking about Bluetooth low energy sensors, then you can make it. Then there's also another aspect of fabrics, which is not just sensing, but also actuation. So we have a project from the NIH looking at developing sensing and actuation techniques for detecting deep vein thrombosis and chronic venous insufficiency, right? Essentially, the reason why on an airplane they tell you to move your legs a lot. So we can develop sensors to tell if someone isn't moving, but then we can also develop bit robots, fabrics that can change their shape with an electrical signal to actually provide therapeutic massage. Okay, so trying to make this technology as unobtrusive as possible. And speaking of unobtrusive, you can see the materials there, where you can see something that's recognizable as a slot antenna and a supercapacitor that's indicated on the diagram. But there's nothing that says that all of these things need to be different colors, right? So they can all be the same color, right? Just be, from our perspective, a fabric. When our fashion designer collaborator did that for the first time, and I couldn't see my beautiful microstrip antenna there, I have to admit, I cried a little bit, but in a manly way, I was kind of punching the wall. But it was upsetting, right? But maybe electrical engineers can have some contributions to the fashion design world, right? Each sheet, we're walking wearing a microstrip antenna. So that's one topic that I have. The next topic that I want to discuss is the use of augmented reality for wireless research, education, and outreach. So I do a lot of work with reconfigurable antennas that can change their propagation characteristics in response to the needs of the communication environment. And as much as I value having Maxwell's equations in order to teach radiation patterns, it's nice to have an app that I can use to show a software-defined radio hooked up to an antenna and having that antenna running a multi-arm banded technique to set its state to transmit in different directions. So we can show that out on the top left. On the top right, we show using physical layer security techniques, how you can generate encryption keys at both ends of the link just using antenna and channel characteristics and reconcile those keys without having to do explicit exchange of those bits. So then, it illustrates that with a little QR type picture of an encryption key, and it will shield to tell you if your nodes are activated. And you can also use this for wireless network configuration. And we have a new project at Drexel now, where we're trying to use this for educational purposes. Okay, so I have two kids who are 7 and 9, and we watch BattleBots a lot, right? But as someone who does wireless radios, we don't have anything like that. We don't have radios that have flamethrowers that go after one another and chainsaws and stuff like that. And my God, I'm not raising mechanical engineers, right? So, all right. So the point of this is to do for BattleBots, do for radio, but BattleBots does for robotics using these techniques.
Wow, that was really fast. Thank you. Comments, reactions?
So two quick things. One, is it dry clean only fabric or machine wash?
Yeah, so it starts up a lot, right? So the scientific answer to your question is we've tested these materials with looking at it under electron microscopy with different sweat formulations and things like that. But the real answer to your question is that right now we accept that you can wash your fabrics in different ways, right? Washing something doesn't mean that you drop it in the hot cycle and run it at full blast, right? We accept that we have to dry clean some things, so we have to hand wash some things. So that's not a barrier to the adoption of this technology.
And the second thing is, when I was a grad student, I always thought it would have been awesome to see spectrum, to visualize spectrum. Have you ever thought of could this be applied, this AR thing, to maybe debugging networks or something like that? Is there alternative uses of this outside of education?
Oh yeah, totally. So the picture on the bottom right shows where you're using this as a local area networking configuration tool, right? So if you look at most interfaces for setting up an access point, it looks like a bad DOS interface from 1983, right? So we are trying to use these techniques to develop ways that someone could graphically go through and see the quality of service to each of their devices, maybe measure happiness, all that, not happiness, but some sort of quality metric using augmented reality techniques.
All right, very nice.
I saw some recent research on this communication between the wearable devices. They actually use the human body as a medium. So can you compare the pro and cons of the human body communication over wireless?
Yeah. So one of the challenges with designing these things is that it is not at all the intended application of a lot of these transceivers, right? So RFID was really meant for inventory management purposes. So if you want to design a tag that can work on a person, you absolutely need to consider the loading characteristics of the human body. In fact, we've reached the point now where antennas actually work better on people than they do in free space because of the way that we've got it optimized to use for people. The other thing is that it may look like just like a flex PCB type of shape, which is on the fabric, but it is not. Designing these things with specific geometries, you have to take into account the fact that the knitting process uses loops, which introduces parasitic, capacitive, and inductive effects. There are a lot of tool development that needs to be done in order for this to be mature enough so that we can use it the same way we use printed circuit board tools today.
All right. Thank you. I guess let's continue on here. Chan-Byoung, so non-RF. This is a wireless conference, right? But there's no wires. So let me see
here
Let me
today.
see if I can play this a little. You wanted to play some of this, right?
Yeah, today I have the molecular communications. So I assume not very many people have heard of the molecular communication. It's a new communication paradigm that does not have RF technologies. So the singing is believing. So let's watch the short video clip first. Robert.
All right.
As sly as a fox, as strong as a fox, as fast as a hare, as brave as a bear, as free as a bird, as neat as a word, as quiet as a mouse, as big as a house.
That is a transmitter.
What's that?
That is a transmitter.
I'm not sure the music corresponds to the video.
As mean as a wolf, as sharp as a tooth, as deep as a brain, as dark as a night, as sweet as a sun, as gray as a road, as long as a road, as ugly as a toad, as pretty as a bitch, kind of fun of bitch, as strong like a family, strong as I wanna be, brave as a bitch, as late as a bitch, as hard as a bitch, as grand as a witch.
You're going to use up all your time here. Tell me when to stop.
So we're trying to deliver the 6 alphabets, Y-O-N-S-E-I. And so we don't have any RF technology here. We don't have any RF antenna, and we don't have any carrier frequency. So rather, we have the chemical messenger molecules to convey the information. So this is molecular MIMO system that we demonstrated at Infocom in 2015.
Right.
Yeah, right. So, you guys may have some questions. Why do we need this kind of technology? Where can we use this technology? To answer those questions, Here we have the two best-known researchers, Klaus Shannon, the father of information theory, and the Richard Feynman, who accelerated research into nanotechnology. The upshot of when Shannon met Feynman is kind of our definition of molecular communications. So here, as you can see from the slide, we have totally different channels. We don't have any RF part here, so we need a new theory. So what is the capacity of diffusion-based channel? And what would be good moderation and demodulation techniques? How can we mitigate the very severe indistinct interference caused by the random movement of the molecules? So since 2011, we've been trying to have the good answers to those kind of questions, but I don't think we have enough time to cover all the issues. So we could have some offline meetings after this panel, and finally at the end, I hope this technology will be applied to like in-body area networks for health monitoring or targeted drug delivery assistance. So here still we have lots of the open questions, and I really hope we have more people to join this project. Is that enough? Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Well, there were no wires there.
You have wires. I don't have any wires here.
So definitely wireless, I'll give you that. I did notice in your video, I mean, you were getting a 1.7x capacity improvement, which was multiplying 0.3 bits per second.
It depends on the distance between the transmitter and receiver, but we're not arguing we could replace the current 5G millimeter wave solution with that. Here, it's a totally different application, but I think 1 bit per second would be enough for in-body area networks. Suppose we have two tiny nanomachines up and down of your heart to monitor the condition of your heart. So we just periodically send some information, 1 bit an hour or 1 bit per minute,
Yeah,
or
it's
something
like,
like that.
are you alive? 1 bit, yes. 0. More than that.
Yeah, 1 0 1 0. Then we could have some sequence to get the old information. So,
does your theory give capacity of this channel in terms of the volume of alpha?
Actually, it's really difficult to have some close-form expression for the capacity, but we could have something for timing channel. But for this kind of pure the diffuse channel, it's hard to have the close-form expression for capacity. But we propose, we design some practical kind of the transmission strategies, and we analyze the achievable rates. And I think that's right now enough to understand the fundamentals of the system.
Yeah, so it seems like you tested it in the medium being the air. Do you expect? What do you expect? Trying the system in different medium, like liquids.
So right now, I just showed the macro scale test bed, but definitely, eventually, we should have the tiny nanoscale test bed to verify the concept. So indeed, I sent one slide to Robert, but he didn't include that one here. Yeah, we plan to do the demonstration next year with our own tiny nanoscale transistor. So hope to have some good results next time.
All right, thank you. Well, let's go to the last presenter here. You can see the one from Silicon Valley, given the conditions that were applied onto the slide here. So Antonio, take it away.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to talk about densification of radios in next generation 5G networks. And so I'm going to start with reviewing what we have today. So 4G small cells. Wireless operators have been densifying base stations as a way to increase capacity in 4G networks. Unfortunately, there are some limitations with small cells. There are some limitations. Physical limitation being intercell interference. As you start densifying the cells, as you make the cells smaller, you have much more interference propagates much better, and so network capacity start degrading and actually drops after a certain point. Through practical field trials, also Professor Jeff Andrews here at UT Austin has shown some analytical studies on the capacity of small cell networks. And you pretty much see that after you go beyond 30 to 50 base stations per kilometer square, the network capacity starts dropping because of intercell interference. And there are other practical challenges to small cells, which is permitting, so city regulations. They impose some permits for the installation of small cells that have significantly slowed down the deployment of small cells, and particularly the wireless carrier in the US that try to kind of relax these requirements, and with the State Bill 649, which unfortunately was vetoed a few weeks ago. So there is a lot of practical and physical challenge with small cell. How are we going to address this problem? How are we going to create more capacity through densification in 5G networks? Well, one solution that 5G NR is considering is utilizing millimeter waves.
Millimeter wave, yes.
Yes, and Robert Heath has done a lot of research, and of course Professor Rappaport.
Okay, good. Thanks, Antonio. Let's wrap it up now.
So millimeter waves. So this is a simulation results by Qualcomm. They simulate propagation millimeter waves using 28 gigahertz carrier frequency, and utilizing the same 4G infrastructure, outdoor infrastructure. In downtown San Francisco, they have 36 base stations per kilometer square. So you can see you get pretty decent coverage with the outdoor. Not so much indoor. We know that there's limitation of propagation through walls. With again 36 base stations per kilometer square, you can get about 65% of the outdoor coverage. In the same report, they've also shown that increasing the density up to 130 base stations per kilometer square, you can go up to over 95% of outdoor coverage. Now, the solution we propose at Artemis is to increase capacity by increasing spectral efficiency of the sub-6 GHz frequencies. And here we show the benefits. So the bottom diagram here is the potential throughput, expressing bits per second per hertz per kilometer square of small cell systems. We use the same model as Professor Andrews here at Austin. And we can see that it's hard to see because of the scale of the diagram, but the potential throughput of small cells basically degrades after 50 cells per kilometer square at that density. When you enable instead a physical layer cooperation, so when you allow all these nodes, all these radios to cooperate, which is what we do with P-Cell, with our technology, you get a linear increase in capacity as you densify the network. So essentially, we are solving the fundamental limit of given by the intercell interference. And you can also see that we can operate even at very high modulation order, like 256 QAM, which is CQI 15 for release 12 LTE devices, because by exploiting macro diversity, we get a uniform coverage in SINR, so we don't have the same degradation at the cell edge as conventional cellular systems. And now the final.
All right, you're running out of time here.
So final summary here of vision for next generation 5G network. So in millimeter waves, you can see you have 28 gigahertz, 100 megahertz of bandwidth, 100 watt transmitter. These are all parameters used by Qualcomm in their network simulator. And with these settings, with 130 radius per kilometer square, you get outdoor coverage. With a data rate between 5 and 65 gigabit per second per kilometer square in terms of, of course we have two numbers because you have the cell edge versus cell center performance, so you're still affected by the degradation of the cell edge. With B-cell, what we do, we again create a very high spectral efficiency at sub-6 gigahertz frequencies. We can operate at very low power level, like 1 watt ERP per radio, because of the very good propagation. So we can go to walls, and we know how well sub-gigahertz frequency perform. So we can provide with the same infrastructure, the same 4G infrastructure of existing wireless carriers. We can provide indoor and outdoor coverage with a consistent throughput of 38 gigabit per second per kilometer square. Again, we do not have the cell edge performance with PSAL because of the macro diversity benefit. And of course, capacity scales with the number of radios, so 10 times more radio will provide 10 times more the capacity. And it works with the conventional LTE devices as well as future generation 5G and R. A quick look at the next slide. And so here, we make this technology very practical. The Artemis team has a good combination of theoretical and practical people. So our product line consists of a software component. So we have a virtualized RAN architecture where everything is running in software. It can run on small PCs and as well as data center depending on the amount of capacity that you require. The remote radio heads are very small. If you're interested, I can show you the model here after this talk. And this is really nice because it's a really small device that you can install everywhere. You can run on utility pole, daisy chain, the radios, so you don't have to incur permitting issues. You can just run it through utility poles. And so it's very easy and permit-free installation. Finally, the third component is the user device. So compatible with any LTE device, and we create our own CPE to provide high capacity also in a small amount of spectrum. If you want to know more, happy to address any question you might have and show you the radios that I brought here. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're about out of time, but a couple of questions here from the panel or reactions.
Are you making this product for an indoor solution or outdoor solution?
So the product is for both indoor and outdoor. In outdoor, there are practical advantages for both of them. So for the outdoor, it's particularly interesting for wireless ISPs and operators because of the low profile and because you can run it through utility poles without having to ask permit to cities and municipalities. For indoor, actually, funny enough, infrastructure company, they're really big about aesthetics. So we made a point of designing these radio in a way that they look pretty. So actually, people would buy them for also indoor applications.
I'm asking this question is that because in order to have such a big database, I mean, in your tables, say you have to deploy 130 cell is it possible to deploy such many cell over such a outdoor environment? I mean, how is it going to be possible? I mean, and also. So you need to have a lot of inter-picocell coordination. So I'm wondering what kind of controller or what kind of inter solution.
No, it's a very good question. So the reason why we put 130 radios number is that's the projection that Qualcomm gave based on their network model. So if you want to obtain 100% of coverage in millimeter waves, you need 130 radius per kilometer squared, okay? So what we are claiming here is that with the same amount of radius, we can provide the same performance as millimeter waves and provide also outdoor to indoor coverage. So it dramatically simplifies the infrastructure costs for operators because now you do not have to build a brand new infrastructure for the indoor. You can if you want to. But you do not have to because, again, sub-6 gigahertz or at least below 3 gigahertz penetrate very well through walls of buildings.
All right. So
I think we're going to have to
Yeah, it looks like we're over time. Yeah, thanks everyone here. We didn't get to all the hard questions, but we'll ask you offline.
And Sanjay and Jeff are going to shut down this workshop.
All right, so thanks for this last panel. Antonio, sorry we had to cut you a little short there. Really, thanks for coming. Very cool stuff. So yeah, I guess we just wanted to close down this 15th anniversary of the founding of WCG. It's been really great. We want to thank RCR Wireless for live streaming this. The video should be available on their website. Also thank our two sponsors, Holland and Knight and Norton Rose Fulbright, as well as the IEEE Communications Society. In particular, we wanted to thank the affiliates of WCG. We had 12 affiliates, is that right? Sanjay's 13 actually now, including one affinity just joined in the last week or so that's here. If you want to get involved with us, obviously we do wireless, we do machine learning. We essentially gave a nice snapshot over this last day and a half of all the key areas we're really active in. And if your company's here and not involved, please contact us on how you can get involved with us. Do you have anything to add, Sanjay?
Thanks very much, Jeff, for pulling all this together. We appreciate it. Big hand for Jeff. And of course, thanks to all our alums. We are really proud of you, and hopefully everybody can see what. Thank you very much.
One last thanks. Thank our staff who have been out here really have made this go seamlessly. Gourmet food, healthy food. Have you ever had healthier food at a conference than I love that. So yeah, thanks to Karen and Teresa and Apipol and Teresa. There's two Teresas. So if you see them, thank them on their way out. And I hope you come next year. We don't have a date yet, or even a theme, but we'll announce it probably in the next couple of months what the theme will be. They'll almost surely be right back in this wonderful venue next fall. We'll see you then.